Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today is the day I will be talking about Exu Calamity. Now, I talked about it a little bit a couple weeks ago now. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago now. But I want to talk about it all now. And to sort of start, I'm going to not spoil anything. I think this, or at least I'm not going to spoil anything until the end. I'm going to do my best not to. I'm going to talk about character motivations, the setting, Avalier itself. And I'm going to talk about Brennan. I don't want to spoil this until we get toward the end because I think this is something that if you're a Critical Role fan, you should go watch because it's awesome. I don't think it's it's something you have to watch. It's not something you can just go and get a review for. It's not something you can just go and, watch a couple of clips and understand the characters themselves and the what happened. You could potentially, but I don't think you should because this is a great story. It is a great story with great characters and with an amazing DM. He is awesome. Brennan is awesome. He is hands down the person aside from Matt that I would have chose to pick for this now. At first I was a little iffy. I didn't know much about him because I was like, this is a section of Matt's world that he's created and taken a lot of time and care for. So for someone else to take the wheel and to do it as amazingly as Brennan did is insane. And I think it was obviously, with Matt's help and with other people's help that they were able to create this game. Because this game was awesome. So I'm going to start with Brennan, I guess. I've already talked about him a little bit. He is excellent. He pulled me in from the off when he opened with Xerxes and his dreams, and then he introduced everyone one at a time in nice, good chunks for themselves to be introduced. It wasn't just, a handful of people getting different times. Everyone got roughly the same amount of time to be introduced, and they all had different themes around them. One was for Xerxes, he was in a dream where it was foreshadowing the calamity, and then we immediately go to Loquacious and see him broadcasting the news, and the two subtle changes were awesome. And then we go down below to Liren and see Liren working on the lay right and all that. I think this stuff, every character had a great introduction, and Brennan did an amazing job. But his style itself, the way he doesn't do a million character voices. Most of them sound like Brennan. But what he does to make them all feel unique is he slows slows down their speech, speeds it up, adds things in between it all, like they bumble over their words, or he does do little things to make them different, but he doesn't change his voice, which in my opinion, you don't need to do. You don't need to make every voice terribly different. Now, contrast that, and I don't want to do this too much, but contrast that with EXU, originally with Abria, where I would say she didn't do this all the time, and most of her characters just sounded like Abria. With what he does is he gives you a character, the way they speak, and you remember it because of that. And I think that was amazing. He did an excellent job of making you remember, oh, that character's that guy, because he starts off with the same sort of speech every time. So as far as him, having NPCs, he did an excellent job. But then there's another level of what he does. There is certainly some amazing acting in there. It's not voice acting, but acting itself. And the specific moment I'm going to talk about is when Xerxes meets with a certain character in a certain realm, or mirror realm, and I full on believed it. I bit tooth and nail. If you know what I'm talking about, I bit so hard on this. I was like, oh yeah, Xerxes is right. There is a chance for redemption for these characters. Everyone's got a chance for redemption. And then later it comes crashing down, and it's just so amazing. And Brennan set that up so well, in my opinion. He is a master of setup and expectations, and when he finally realizes that setup and expectation, it is a slam dunk. He did an excellent job with making me hate characters, making me like characters, making me think this character has a chance to be something better. And he did an excellent job setting up the story and how each person connects to each other. Because these characters have a long history with each other. And you could easily just be like, you guys know each other. But the way Brennan formulated this was spectacular. And I have to talk about him for a couple minutes there. So moving on to, aside from Brennan, we had the other people at the table. So Travis, Marisha, Sam, Lou, Luis, and Abria, they were all fantastic players. They all had different characters. Like literally, sometimes you get characters who are roughly the same, like they have a lot of similar motivations. I think everyone here has a unique motivation. Obviously, they have Avalier as a motivation, but then they have their true motivation, their true thing that drives them forward, and everyone's different. So Saret, I'm going to start with Saret, is Travis's character. Aarakocra, or whatever the name is that Matt uses for Aarakocra. I don't like that name. I like Aarakocra better. I'm sure it has something to do with licensing and stuff like that. But the bird folk, Saret is a badass, an inquisitive rogue. He is badass. He is the Eye of Avalier, and he is a cop detective, and he's so badass. The character was created to see the connections that other people don't see through lies, through deception, see the truth where no one else is willing to look. And the character did it. He was awesome. He really made me go, this is going to be intense. Because right from the off, his motivation isn't necessarily clear. His motivation is his family. And that's not something that we get in the first episode. Whereas the rest of the characters, I feel like we get their motivation pretty early on. With the exception of maybe Loquacious as well. Loquacious and Saret's motivation kind of come later. But everyone else is pretty upfront. Saret's motivation is his family, but he also wants to protect Avalier, and his family's part of Avalier, so it seems like the two are the same. And that's how he lives his life, thinking that I protect Avalier, I protect them. And until the end, where it's, what's more important, Avalier or my family, and when he picks his family, that's insane. That to me is awesome. Throwing away what you thought was your motivation and, doing your going for what your actual motivation is was great. And Saret himself is just fun. The rogue class is always fun to watch because that expertise allows you to basically never fail and you're really good at the things you're good at. And him being the only one to sort of pick things apart as he was able to and realize Vespin's inclusion in all of this, realize that Vespin's not dead when everyone else is like, oh, he's fucking dead, who cares? He realized that that's not true. That's not the case. He even had another Eye of Avalier there with him, and he didn't even see what, Saret saw. So, Saret is a badass rogue with fucking hand axes as his weapons, and he's just really cool. And I really liked everything about Saret. The class, the race, his motivation, the way he acted with other people. He didn't trust the Ring of Brass, which is nuts to me. These are people you've been working together with for ages. And there was never an instance where I thought he fully trusted a single one of them. And that is just very interesting, very unique. Because normally in a group, like a group of 6 of players, there's, tend to be breakdowns of groups of people who trust each other more. Like Loquacious and Liren, or Xerxes and Nydas. And Patia and Saret did have a connection with Maya, Saret's daughter, but I still don't think he trusted her. And that's what's so fascinating. This is a guy who, he's the Batman of the group. He is looking at them like, if I have to get rid of these people, I might have to, and I'll do it. I think that is what's so interesting about Saret is he's the one person who, out of all the rest of the group, isn't selfish. Everyone else is selfish in their motivations, where Saret is truly thinking of other people. Everyone else is selfish, and I really enjoyed that about Saret, standing out from the pack. He is the only one that doesn't use magic, and that is, to me, incredibly interesting in the Age of Arcanum, where you can be such a high level person and be in the ring of brass without magic. And I think that was such an awesome, unique character to be in this world. And he's literally unique. There's no one else like Seret in Avalier. Seret is a standout in a room filled with people who in a regular age would be standouts. If these characters were all in the current age of Critical Role or of Exandria, every single one of them would stand out with the exception of Seret. Seret would just not even be visible. You wouldn't see Seret. But Seret is so unique in this world that he stands out amongst everybody. Everyone else is a magic user. Everyone's like, oh, they got magic, whatever. They all have protection of, rings of mind protection. But Seret is just a dude that's protecting people using his intellect without magic. And that is awesome. He stands out as the investigator, as the rogue, and the mage slayer. He is designed to kill magic users. And that's why I personally want to call him the Batman of this group. Because all of these guys, if they cast a spell near him, he can kill them. And I think that's what's so cool about Seret. Seret, like I said, stands out from the pack for being the person who's willing to take the pack down. That, to me, is awesome. So next, we're going to talk about Liren. She is the architect of Avalier, or the arcane architect, whatever you want to call her. The person who's making sure that the engines of Avalier stay aloft. And her motivation is to progress, to move Avalier forward, and to be rid of the fucking bureaucracy of Kavorda down below. Was that what it's called, Kavorda? The city that they're going to land in. She wants to move past that and be able to just have Avalier travel amongst the realms or throughout the realms, and she wants to progress Avalier so that they don't have to worry about the druids down below. That is her motivation and her goal. I guess that's more of her goal. Her motivation is probably Evandrin, because this was something Evandrin wanted too. But she's so absorbed by this that she doesn't see the issues that would bring. She's not telling anyone. The only people who know about this are, in my opinion, like at the beginning, are Loquacious, Nydas, and Patia. So it kind of leaves Xerxes and Seret out, and everyone else in Avalier. So that, to me, she is the deceitful character. She's the reason that the Calamity even is possible, because she's creating these, 10 spots between people. With her making this ley line or the ley right, to be able to travel along the ley lines, is what makes it possible for these gods to come back. And it literally is. That is what Asmodeus wants to use when they land to bring the Emperor and the Empress back. And it's all Liren's fault because she didn't see the potential risk. Or it's not that she didn't see it. She just didn't care. That is fascinating. A character who is doing something for Avalier, but for herself. Like I said, these characters are selfish. I said during the Seret video, or the Travis video about ranking characters, that I believed Seret is a character who is like an upstanding citizen surrounded by narcissists. And Liren, being consumed by her work, to me, is that narcissist. She is so absorbed by what she does, and it's not narcissist, it's more, a different word to use it. Narcissist means that she's in love with herself, but that's not it. She is in love with her work and the things that she does, and she doesn't care what it could do. I don't even think the idea of potentially destroying whatever was below them was a concern for her. It was more of, I just want to progress the city. And that is scary, because that makes you a villain. If this character was plopped into modern day, she would be Lucian. Lucian wanted to bring the city from the astral plane to the material plane. That's the same goal. That is what she wanted. She wanted to go to the astral plane. She is a character who, if you placed her in campaign 3, would be the villain, surrounded by her work, wanting to progress her idea and other people's. Like, she wants to not care about other people and just wants her thing to succeed. That's what was so interesting about this character. She went so far to make sure that this succeeded that she didn't even care about hurting Patia in the end. When Patia's arm was stuck in the tree and she fucking blasted it. Like, she just didn't care about what she was doing. And that is nuts. This character is a villain. And I think there was a negative reception from the fans watching about Liren, which is the point. She's the villain. Or she's one of the villains. She's a tool being used by a villain, much like Xerxes. And I think that was missed by a large portion of the fans. Or not a large portion, by a portion of the fans. That this character isn't meant to be the hero. This character is an antagonist. And it's fucking so interesting to see this character be surrounded by a character like Serret. Or to be near a character like Serret. And technically be near a character like Xerxes. An upstanding citizen. A paladin of the people. And she's still doing something super, super selfish. And selfishness is going to continue down this list as we talk about Loquacious, whose motivation is Liren. He doesn't give a shit about anything else but Liren. And he is a news broadcaster who, the herald of Avalier, who is willing to hide the truth. He is literally the mouthpiece of Avalier. And just is so willing to lie for Liren. And this, like, he lied for Liren about everything. About protecting her, about people finding out about this whole lay right situation, about Evandrin dying. He protected her. He even at the end was made a crystal to say, I'm the one who did this. This is all my fault. Liren wanted to stop me. Like, that was the whole thing with him. He wanted to protect his wife or his ex-wife and then wife again. And that is an interesting character motivation in and of itself. He gave up his life in the Fey realm to protect her. In his final, in the final confrontation, I'm going to get to later, his last, action that he really took was to heal her so she could finish the lay rite. That was so interesting to me that he was willing to do so much for this person that he can see is doing the wrong thing. He even says at one point that he is scared of what Liren is doing, but he continues to back her. The motivation of love in this character is awesome, and it's selfish because again, his goals align with Liren, which immediately make him a very selfish person. I would say even more selfish because he doesn't even care about Avalier. He cares about Liren, and whatever Liren wants, he wants, and that is, while doesn't seem selfish, it is selfish because in his heart, that's what he cares about. He doesn't even care if Liren is happy about it at the end as long as he's with Liren. At least that was the vibe I got from it. Because if Liren got what she wanted, that means they're still around and Loquacious gets what he wants. That's the kind of vibe I got from Loquacious, that he was willing to lie, that he was willing to cheat people, he was willing to do whatever it takes, fire people, defame them for Liren. That is powerful. And again, he would be Liren's underling, the villain's henchman, if they were plopped into the current timeline. So Loquacious, and he's a changeling, which automatically is very deceitful, and the bard class that he is, and the warlock class that he is, he's a character built around deceit and lies and being untrustworthy. And it's interesting. So the selfishness continues with Loquacious and Liren Sealy. That is, to me, those two epitomize being selfish, and that is really interesting. So now we have Nydas, a character who will very openly say he's selfish until the end, where he becomes the least selfish in my opinion. He is the last, I think he's the last dragon of Avalier is what he kept calling himself, and he is the guildmaster of the Golden Scythe. He's basically the dude who holds all the money. And he shows off. He shows off his wealth when he brings up the most difficult tree to grab in Marquette at the ball. He does this over and over again. He makes the taxmen, as he put them. He is in control of making all of these automatons and all of these creatures that help make Avalier run better, and he uses them to help Liren. Again, I don't know what exactly made him compel. Like, I guess it was just, you're my friend, I'm gonna help you, and it's a goal that we all want. Quotes, because they're not thinking about other people. They think they're thinking about other people and like getting away from the druids, but what Nydas realizes in the end, and why his character is so interesting, is he starts off as a pirate and then becomes like the bank of Avalier, and that is still kind of a seedy position. You go from being a pirate, a bad person, to being a bad person in a fucking political sense. You're the guy who holds all the gold, and you give out money to people you care about and less money to people you don't. And that's very, very much the opening for Loquacious. For Nydas. When Nydas first got introduced, someone literally came up to him and said, hey, I hear you can give me extra whatever it was. I believe it was maybe brimstone. I don't quite remember now. That was episode 1. And he's like, no, I don't give that shit out. And then he immediately, asked Patia about it. Like, hey, did you tell this person about this? And she's like, no. So then they had to deal with it because the circle of trust got broken. And as far as Nydas is concerned, his circle of trust is the ring of brass plus his brother. And it's very interesting. Eventually it grows. No, I wouldn't say the ring of, like, his ring of trust grows, but his person grows to become someone who is willing to defend people. Gold be damned, as he put it at the end. And he's like, the people are what matter, like what matter right now. The people. And with that, he goes out and protects the people. He uses his automatons to protect the people during the calamity, or at the beginning of the calamity, and tosses the fucking gold aside and doesn't care anymore. And that, to me, from a pirate who's about getting money and wealth and becoming the banker who is about hoarding that wealth to becoming the guy who says fuck the wealth, was a very awesome, interesting character. He shed off that skin of selfishness and became selfless in protecting other people. And he does it in 2 ways at the end with Xerxes as well. While he still does it in a way that he couldn't do it while, conscious, he still does it in a way that it'll happen no matter what happens to Nydas, which is interesting to me. And Nydas as a character, I feel like, is the person who changed the most out of all of them. He went from a character, well, not physically, but mentally, he went from that selfish pirate that wanted money and whatever that came with it, to being the guy who's informing Loquacious about how to protect the people. And that is awesome. That is a cool character, that is a fun character, and that is a lot of character growth in 4 episodes. Now moving on to Patia, who is the person, or the character, who has the most complicated change at the end. So she starts off as a character in the pursuit of knowledge. She's the keeper of scrolls. She is the granddaughter of the person who lifted Avalier itself into the sky. And she wants to preserve that. She wants to be perfect. She wants to make Avalier perfect. She wants to hold all the knowledge. She wants to understand everything about the world. And she wants to be the person that if you came to, she has the answer. And that's a flaw. Because no matter what, you're not going to hold all the answers. You have 900 years of life as an elf. And in that time, the likelihood of you getting all of the answers is 0. And being perfect. She erases memories to be perfect. And that, as a character, is very intriguing. To forget things because that doesn't make me perfect. To forget failure because that doesn't make me perfect. What's interesting about the character is she doesn't see how failure makes someone better. And this is something that was kind of entrusted, like not entrusted to her, but taught to her by her grandfather, who lifted Avalier. And then in the end, when she remembers that before he was old and bitter, that this guy said, what's more important, the dream or the dreamer? Which, fucked me up on a whole other level. Fucking Brennan, what are you doing? You're screwed. That was the part that got me pretty bad. That was the part where I was like, Jesus, what is more important, the dream or the dreamer? And in that moment when she realized that her grandfather, the person who lifted Avalier, said it's more important to continue dreaming and let that old dream fall because you can just rebuild that old dream again. And that's when Patia's character comes full circle and she's now no longer caring about being perfect. I mean, she loses an arm and fingers and she just goes from this character who is the embodiment of perfect to a character who is at the end anything but. And that was interesting. And another part of her character that I didn't clue in on right at the beginning, and I still don't have the full answer to, is her relationship with the person that everyone forgot the name of. So that is heavily implied to be the Raven Queen. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's just blatantly stated to be the Raven Queen. But the question that I have is, because this is one of the only things that I didn't quite get the answer to, and I saw people talking about it, is that her mother? Is the Raven Queen her mother? And is that why her grandfather gets all twisted and gets all bitter? Because he created this world for wizards and people to not necessarily believe in religion, for her daughter to turn into a fucking god herself and then hide that knowledge. Or is that just supposed to be someone who was a mentor? Because the way that Brennan phrased it from her grandfather was that her parents failed. So to me that means potentially religion stepped into things and that's what made her parents fail. Or they just didn't do enough for Avalier. So that's the question I have. Do you all think Patia's mother is the Raven Queen? That's my question. Because that is out of everything that I had questions for as we progressed through these 4 episodes, is the only thing that I think didn't get answered for me. Was that. Is Patia's mother the Raven Queen? Because I think it is. I think that would be far more compelling than just her parents failed. I would think failure in success in becoming a god, but failure in the eyes of Avalier is a far more compelling thing than these people just didn't do enough for Avalier. So, I don't know. Tell me what you think, if you think Patia's mom is the Raven Queen or not. So then moving on to Xerxes, who also a selfish character, I would say, and he does it in the guise of not being selfish. He is the paladin of the people, and his motivation is to get the fuck off Avalier. His motivation is his son. His motivation is Evandrin, his husband, and to get away from Avalier, the place where, neither of those two people are, is interesting. And Evandrin being killed off before everything starts, and we don't get to see everything about Evandrin before the story begins, set up a really interesting mystery. And for a while, I thought Evandrin was turned into a god and became Asmodeus. That was the thing that fucked me up, because for a period of time, that's what I really believed. Because Xerxes, as a character, believes everyone has a chance for redemption. So he has sort of two, motivations here. He wants to... I think he thought the same thing I did. I think he thought that Evandrin turned into Asmodeus, and he wanted to turn Evandrin back from Asmodeus. And that's why he believed that that character could be redeemed. He believed a betrayer god could be redeemed. And this was the setup I was talking about earlier with him in the other realm with Asmodeus. I've kind of thrown I'm not going to spoil anything out the window. But Asmodeus and him talking in the mirror world, and it was just, he made him look like Evandrin. And right after episode 3 finished, where everything kind of started to turn to shit, I went to one of the chats for the Twitch stream and saw the first creed of Asmodeus is, if you see weakness or compassion, fucking abuse it. And I was like, oh, because that fucked me up. I thought the moment in the mirror world was a legit character moment for Asmodeus, realizing that there are good people out there who are seeking to help them, and that there are people who don't just see these gods as bad people, because Xerxes doesn't believe the gods came first. Xerxes think they were there first, and the gods came and started shaping things, and that the gods wouldn't have anything if not for the people of Exandria, which is an interesting thought and compelling to maybe look at down the line, but I don't think it's true at the same time. I think it's probably more like plausible that the gods in Matt's world came and shaped things in the eyes of something else that came before. And Xerxes believing that there's redemption for everyone sets up his failure. Sets up his failure to see deception, deceit, and his over-trusting of someone who really shouldn't be trusted, versus not trusting a lot of the people in his own group. He doesn't necessarily, he didn't trust people enough to the point where he put down a zone of truth because he wanted to get the truth out no matter what. But he didn't do that with Asmodeus. And he had a weird relationship with Asmodeus to the point where it truly looks like he believed that Asmodeus might have been Avandrin. But then we get the whole history of Avandrin wanting to move from the material plane to the astral plane or to other planes, and that when he got shunted there, he got turned into someone who's from there, and that when he tried to return, he died because his body wasn't from there anymore. He was rejected by the world and by the by the ley lines and the tree in Avalier. And that is sort of the thing that Xerxes didn't realize. That Xerxes, he forgot it, is basically what they did. Patia removed that memory from him, that what they did to try to bring him back, and it didn't succeed, which is what I believe truly planted in his mind that maybe he's a god now, that they did the god ritual and that's what happened. But the intriguing thing about Xerxes is how far he was willing to go to prove that everyone can be redeemed, to the point where his friends are being thrown about. One of them's dead, guaranteed dead at this point, and he's pulled Asmodeus through the tree and is now linked to him, and he tries to fix him, to make him redeemed, and then Asmodeus shows his true colors, and even after that he said that's bullshit. That's bullshit. Until he sees Avandrin again. So it's hard talking about Xerxes without talking about the story, because I feel like he is truly the one that's the deepest into the villain and such. So when he sees Avandrin again and realizes that, shit, I fucked up, but now he has one chance to fix things, which is to help sort of stop Asmodeus and the betrayer and the primordials, and he gives up potentially being with Avandrin. There's always the chance that he was going to be with Avandrin in some way, somehow, and he gave up that chance to help Avalier. So he also shed his selfish skin and became more selfless in the final acts. And as he was being turned into a devil because he made a deal with Asmodeus, which allowed him to fight, he rebelled against the idea of turning into a devil for truth until the very end, which was, to me, sad, because he was, out of everyone, he's the only person that didn't get a satisfying conclusive ending. Everyone else sort of got an ending where their character arc came full circle, except Xerxes. Xerxes got to meet Avandrin again, and he got to say goodbye to his son, but he didn't get to see if Asmodeus could truly be redeemed. And for him to be the one who ultimately fails out of everything, Liren got what she wanted, Loquacious technically got what he wanted, Nydas changed who he was, and at the end he successfully helped people survive, and his brother survived. Patia shared the knowledge that she'd collected for years, and like gave it to someone else so that Avalier could theoretically rise again because what's more important, the dream or the dreamer. And in that sense, I think she thinks the dream can be passed on to another dreamer. So she kind of twisted that. And then Sarah got to live. He got to go back to his family because of the acts of all of his friends and the 2 remaining friends at the end. So I think now I'm going to talk about the final confrontation, where they had 3 turns to sort of rework the layrite. So this is where I'm going to I think I already delved into some spoiler territory with Xerxes' entry, but now I'm getting into like in-depth talk about a little bit more of it. So the final confrontation with Vespin is interesting. It's in the where the engine room, basically, with where we met Liren for the first time. So it's a nice full circle for the campaign itself too. And there to rework the layrite into stopping the primordials from coming back, which is interesting. They have 3 turns. Now I'm a big fan of the idea of like putting a time limit on combat, because this episode was already 6 hours and it could have been 8 if they had done like a full fucking combat for this. But instead, Brennan did the smart thing, put a time limit on it. You have 3 turns to properly fix this or it's over, basically. Or all you need is 3 turns, and if you can buy yourself a 4th, maybe. So when Vespin shows up with the taxmen that were created by Nydas, and he sees what his creations are good for, which is fucking up wizards apparently, he attacks them, and his goal is simply to get rid of Liren. And everyone else is running defense. Xerxes, Sarah, and Nydas sort of grab the door and hold the line, whereas Loquacious and Patia stand with Liren and protect her in the back. And this was awesome. I thought, these characters have been showing us throughout this entire campaign that this is what they're good for, and they all start doing their best work in the end. And this was only 3 turns, I believe. I think it might have started stretching into the 4th, maybe. And this is when people start dropping. The first one to go is Xerxes. He is now fully consumed, not fully consumed. He is now a devil who is just about to be consumed by Asmodeus's sort of deal with him and the mace, which was I think it's a vestige. I'm pretty sure that mace is a vestige. And that was his last chance to be able to fight back. He was given a deal, or Vespin, when he sort of fixed him, gave him an extra bit of time before he turned into what Vespin was. So now he's fighting against Vespin, the thing he's going to turn into, and he elects to die. He elects to turn around in the middle of his combat and die. Or at least start his death process, because he doesn't think that if he turns, they'll succeed. So then Nydas sees this, and they're all weakened from the beginning where they're at the tree and it fucking blows up. So they're all kind of weakened with the exception of the brilliant Serret. So then Nydas sort of runs over top of him, slashes at one of the taxmen, and then aims his sword to plunge into Xerxes' heart. And that's when both of these characters effectively die. Nydas gets cut down by a taxman, his sword plunges into Xerxes, and they both die. That was fucked up. And what I said about Nydas earlier was he didn't have the strength to do it himself, because I'm pretty sure Nydas could do 2 attacks. And if Nydas had attacked him once and then attacked him again, Xerxes is done, and we didn't have to worry about Xerxes coming back at all. But instead he only gave him 2 death saves and effectively killed him. But he didn't do it through his own will. He did it through, this taxman is going to do it, so this is a workaround, so I don't have to say I killed my friend. And again, a little bit of selfish still showing up in Nydas. So then, after that, the next person to go is actually Patia, who puts up a wall of force around Loquacious and Liren, who Liren has mirror image up, and the taxmen run up, and they have a dispelling magic cone, which also deal damage depending on the save and the spell slot that you use. And that's how Patia dies, from her own thing being dispelled. And then Liren gets nearly knocked down because of that same cone, but Loquacious held an action to heal her. So the minute she went down, she got brought back up, and then it was her turn. So now the only 3 people left standing are Liren, Loquacious, and Seret. As everyone else is gone, they complete the lay rite and stop the primordials from coming back. This, to me, was what everything was building toward. Because it's Exu Calamity. It's not EXU, we're having a nice day at the park. This moment is the most important moment because this is what the buildup was. The tree section of the campaign is also really important, but it's something that I think you have to go watch because that was insane. There's no way I can describe the tree moment to anyone. But now the taxmen sort of stop as Asmodeus has to reassess what he's doing and change what he wants, and he says, if Dominus is the smile on Exandria, let's shatter her teeth, which Brennan then says this is what is known as the shattered teeth now, which is really cool if you have read the campaign guides for, I believe it's either Tal'Dorei or Wildmount, and the shattered teeth is something that they've kind of been talking about from campaign 1 to now, and to see how it's created is awesome. I think they describe the shattered teeth as like the Bermuda Triangle, which would make sense because of all the friggin' Avalerian shit that's there. Because if this thing blew up above the shattered teeth, that makes sense to me. So then everything's crumbling down in Avalier. Liren and Loquacious give up. They say, there's no way we're living this. We're just going to die together. And Loquacious and her remarry, technically. But then Seret gets a call from his family on his like little messaging stone, and they ask if he's coming back. He says, yeah, I'm coming back, which was, I kind of wished Brennan had pointed out the ring started glowing. Oh no, he took the ring off. Never mind. So he kind of lies about that at first, but then he realizes that Liren's still up and that the labyrinth that they're in, she created, or she knows in and out, and she'll be able to help him get out. And because he's a rogue, because he's a flying rogue, he moves 150 feet per round and is able to fly his way out, and he's able to return to his family. So the consequences is everyone's dead, the calamity still happens, but Seret gets to go back to his family. And that is way better than everyone dying. If everyone had died, there was no point. Because we now know there's going to be X amount of years in Calamity. And eventually it ends. But this says that there's people still around to be able to tell the story of the Ring of Brass. And Seret is still around, and his daughter has the information from Patia. And it is all just so much better than if all of them had died. If they all died, it would have been like, oh well, this is cool. But one of them got to live, and one of them got to, I would imagine, fight in the Calamity. He has to fight for a world for his children, and his children eventually have to fight too. And he can train them to become basically Eyes of Avalier just like him. So the idea of Seret still being around during Calamity gives me some good sequel stuff that I think they could run with. But who knows? Yeah, I think this was awesome. This whole campaign, the characters, I don't even think I've talked about like Avalier itself yet, with the higher up people, like the 3 levels of the rings. There's the gold ring, silver ring, and the brass ring, which the brass ring is our characters. And then we have the people who live there who don't have to deal with weather during the years, who only have to do it for a month at a time every 7 years, who have to deal with crappy weather, which was something brought up right at the beginning. There's these big, like, television screens, basically, that Loquacious broadcasts his news from, and one of them is on the face of the big waterfall. There's a statue of Patia's grandfather, the man who lifted Avalier into the sky, holding a miniature of Avalier. The city itself is interesting, and they point out that there's more than just one floating city. Aor is one of them, which I love me some Campaign 2 references. Aside from that, the city itself is really cool and filled with technology and magic and advancement that is not present in the current setting, which to me is always fun to see. It's always like Final Fantasy VII, the ending of Final Fantasy VII, where, spoilers if you haven't played that, I guess skip for like the next 30 seconds. You play through Midgard and you go outside of the world, and then you come back to Midgard, which is a really advanced sort of bleak city, and then at the end of the game it's like 1,000 years later, and Red 13 comes down and looks at the city covered in moss because the world took it back over. That is what I feel is going to happen with everything these floating cities and everything during the Calamity does. Like, the Calamity is not a sign of the end, it's a sign of a new beginning. That is what's so intriguing about this story, about this failure of the Ring of Brass. Effectively, the failure to prevent the Calamity, but they succeeded in allowing the world to begin anew. That is so intriguing to me, and I like to see that we have a new world. Obviously, this is a prequel, so we have to lead into something else, and it leads into the other campaigns. And we see that there's a new world, and we see that there are still technical advancements progressing. Eventually, they might get to a new age of Arcanum. Hopefully they don't, because maybe that'll lead into another Calamity. It's a cycle, and that is scary to think about. Maybe Campaign 3 is the beginning of the new cycle. I don't know, it's pretty interesting. This was awesome, and I've been talking for 40 fucking 6 minutes. So, yeah, I hope I've done a good job explaining why I liked this, because I like the characters, the setting, the villains. Asmodeus, if you need to understand why Asmodeus is so good, look up on YouTube Asmodeus quotes "and we were called betrayers." That alone should sell you on EXU, or EXU Calamity, because that was brilliance. That was awesome. That was amazing DM work. And I don't think I've talked about Brennan enough, but I think I'm going to say one more thing about Brennan. He and Matt are fucking geniuses. And so the reason I say this is episode, 18, 19, when they were in the Twilight Museum, I believe it was one of those 2 episodes, Matt brought up Vespin Chloris. He had the fake book of Vespin Chloris, who happened to be the villain of EXU Calamity, or one of the villains. And just sneaky bastards, these two. I think Matt totally said, I'm going to do something for you, because putting Vespin in my mind before EXU Calamity came out made me so intrigued in the Vespin character that when we got to see him, the fight meant so much more. Because the Vespin character is still seen as a villain in the current world. He is seen as the ultimate villain, and the Ring of Brass isn't seen as any sort of villain. And that was something that Nydas said. Do you want your work to be remembered or not? And he said no. Which is good, because I think a lot of people might see the Ring of Brass, especially Lirin, if any information ever got out, as a villain. So the fact that Vespin is still seen as a villain, even though he realistically regretted what he did, is amazing. And I think Matt setting that up was perfect. And I think him and Brennan must have talked for fucking hours about this. They must have talked about everything they wanted to do for so long. Like, this is like a love letter to hardcore Critical Role lore fans. And while I'm not quite there yet, I do enjoy the lore. I do know a little bit about it, like more than your average Critical Role member or fan, I would imagine. But this story is going to be a gateway for a lot of people to get into the lore of Critical Role and start buying the books. And yeah, this was awesome. Brennan was awesome. The players were awesome. The characters were awesome. The villains were awesome. The setting was amazing. And that was EXU Calamity. I don't know what else to say other than, is it Thursday yet?